Jayant, welcome to this episode of the NewSpace India podcast.
Oh, thank you. Happy to be here.
Right, and I know you for quite a long time now. In fact, I think almost 15 years since...
It was in the Mysore COSPAR meeting.
Right, and...
The first meeting, yes.
Right. So it's been, quite a long time. And one of the conversations I really wanted to capture is your own background, having, born and brought up in India, and then, having lived in Africa, having studied in North America and coming back to India. So it's a very big circle overall. So let's kick off this conversation by, getting a little bit of your own life in, before IIA, the Indian Institute of Astrophysics, and how you went from, living in Africa to North America and coming back to India.
Yeah, so I was born in Shillong, and then when I was I must have been late, when I was about 13 or so, we moved to Zambia. I mean, we lived in Canada for a bit, but we moved to Zambia, and that's where I did my high school. So it was a great experience living in Zambia. It was, the country had only been independent for about 10 years by then. And so things were just building up. My father was working in the power sector, as was my grandfather. And I went to a pretty good school, International School of Lusaka. And from there, I did my SAT and got into Johns Hopkins. So I went to Johns Hopkins for my undergraduate degree. By the way, I was the day I landed at Hopkins, I turned 16. So it was a big thing to be. I was very young to go completely out from home, go live in the dorms. And then after that, after I got my BSc, I was looking around for places to go, and it just so happened that Hopkins had the Space Telescope. They got the Space Telescope Science Institute. So I thought it'd be a great place to do graduate work. And so I was accepted for my PhD program at Hopkins, and I stayed on. In retrospect, the Space Telescope, as most space projects do, it took much longer than people had thought. And so there really was not much of an opportunity for me to get involved with the Space Telescope or with the people there. But I got to work on a space shuttle project. And so finally that finished. Then I went to NASA for 2 years. Didn't like it very much because it was a little bureaucratic. So I got back to the university, and I was at Hopkins till about 2000. 2000 was about when the AstroSat program was starting up. And so we were building UVIT. And so I thought this was a good opportunity. And plus, you always have that sense that maybe you want to come back and do something for your country. So it seemed like a good opportunity. And I came to IIA. Turned out that AstroSat was perhaps not the right project because it took so long, and it was not launched until 2015. And for science, if you spend 15 years, it's too much. 15 years of your life. So I got involved in other things, but was still involved with AstroSat. And so that brings us more or less to the present day. Been at IIA now for 20 years, longer than I've been anywhere else.
Right, it's fascinating that you made the decision to actually come back during the time, and given that I'm assuming that given your primary education, as in at least secondary education with bachelor's, master's, PhD, all being abroad, might have been quite a big culture shock to come back.
The thing about work. The big thing about academic culture in India is that everything is so much smaller. So in the US, you have thousands of people. Any field, any place you go, you have thousands of people. In India, you're lucky to have 100 people. And in your own particular area of astronomy, you might be the only one. So in many ways, I'm still the only UV astronomer in the country. I mean, real hardcore UV astronomer. Plus my students, of course. So everything is smaller, and as a result, things get magnified. So you have more of an opportunity to make a mark. At the same time, what you have less of an opportunity to interact with other people. So, you know, both ways. In general, I think that we're hurt by not having a large enough science community in the country.
Right. And one of the curious things that I wanted to ask you here is, how did you manage to, land a position in IAA? Was there like open positions? Because I suppose, government recruiting largely applies to places like IAA as well, where they call out for applications and you have to apply and there's an interview process. And that's assuming, that's the traditional means. I'm assuming that's how it's done for IAA as well.
We had we have a standing advertisement, so people can apply whenever they want. My coming here was a little bit of an exception, because along with several other people, we had Ramnath Kaushik was the director at the time, and I was growing very rapidly, and they wanted to hire in a few specific areas. And so because Astrosat was there, they specifically wanted to they specifically wanted my expertise. So I had asked around, and some people who knew me and who were here in IA, they came and they asked me to apply, and so I applied, and that's really how I got in, through people who I knew, and because my expertise was in need at the time. And we still do it that way. If we're looking for expertise in some particular area, we do try to attract people.
Right, but from your experience, so far, I think the astronomy community in India and astronomers from India who work abroad, what is the size of that looking like today?
What is the size?
Yeah, the size of the community, because I meet a lot of them who are abroad, and I know only a bunch of them who are in India.
So the size is still there's still many more Indians working abroad, and especially in China now. There's a lot of Indians working in China. Now, there's a lot of opportunity now because there's a lot of places coming up. The ICERs, IITs are expanding, a lot more IITs. So there are places coming up, even some of the private universities. But as you say, the majority of astronomers are still abroad. There are still not enough good positions for astronomers in the country. There are any number of positions, but many of them don't encourage research. So if you want to do research and stay in astronomy, you have to get the right position. And there are not so many of those in the country. In fact, many of the people you meet are possibly even postdocs. And this is something that we have a significant lack of opportunity for. We are open to postdocs, but we often encourage postdocs to go outside, because just to broaden their own horizons, let them work outside our small community and let them get involved with global research.
Right, and one of the key factors here, I suppose, is institutional expansion. As in, when you were there, I guess IAA was there, and a couple of other legacy institutions, and the ICERs and the IITs and all of them coming up with astronomy programs is a more recent phenomena. Is that correct?
That's right. There are many more opportunities now. There are a lot of ICERs, a lot of IITs, and many of them do want astronomers as well as other fields. So there are more places to apply to. And this, in a way, makes it more difficult for us, because there's monkeys upstairs, I think. So this makes it more difficult for us because there's a lot more competition for the kind of people we want to attract. Now, this is a serious problem that if people are working in good projects outside the country, very often they want to continue working there. Or if they get a chance to go to an excellent institution outside the country, again, you have many more opportunities than you might have in India, where you're a little bit isolated. we're far from anywhere. In Europe, all the European scientists meet each other regularly, at least in non-COVID times. The same thing in the US. We don't have that critical mass in India. So it does get difficult for us to compete in that way. We do get people who do want to come back to India for family reasons, or maybe just because they're comfortable. And we're getting some excellent people, but not nearly as many as we should be getting.
Right. What is the incentive for a lot of the folks, apart from, family ties or, let's say, attachment to the country in itself, leaving those aside, professionally, are there some unique advantages of coming back to India in certain areas in astronomy, or to kick off your career and make a mark for yourself in the whole international community?
One of the great advantages that we have is that our salary is guaranteed, which is not the case abroad in many cases. And so we all have permanent positions. And of course, that can be a negative in some ways, maybe, but if you really truly do care about doing science, then we have the freedom to do the science without necessarily worrying about where our next paycheck is coming from. So that is an advantage, and one shouldn't neglect that. Other than that, we do have access to many students. Again, outside also you do, but we can have the potential to have more students. Where I think we're missing the opportunity is we should be doing what the Chinese did, which is really just to pump money into the field, attract postdocs, attract faculty, bring back faculty from outside, have collaborations with outside. And that you should look at the scale of the Chinese program. They have some 4,000 people in astronomy compared with our 200-300. So it's just, we're missing that opportunity. For a very little money, I think we could be doing so much more.
And that is primarily because most of the money comes from DST, or, how does funding in astronomy work in India against, other countries?
In astronomy in particular, I'm not sure. I can tell you that in China, it's 2.5% or so of the GDP, and most of that comes from the government. In India, we're about 0.7% of the GDP, and most of that comes from the government. Abroad, the government investment is not that different, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9%. But abroad, you get a lot of money from outside, and that we don't seem to have in India. So, for instance, just to take a name at random, Godrej or L&T, if they decided to put some of that CSR money in astronomy, put some of the corporate social responsibility money, I think that it would have a great impact and would help them too, because it would drive new areas of research.
Correct. And I guess, that's needs some kind of evangelization. I don't know if that's a unique model that people have to experiment with in India, because, this is not really funding that traditionally aerospace giants would give universities like MIT or whatever to research and, contribute IP to the company. But this is more like, as you said, corporate social responsibility to make up for the lack of the money for investment coming from the government.
Yeah, I have a serious problem in that, as you know, I can talk to anyone. I can talk to anyone, and but what I can't do is I can't sell things. I got a PhD. Why did I get a PhD? I got a PhD to do science, and so I give lots of talks. I give talks to students. I give talks to many places. But what I'm not able to do is I'm not able to go to Narayan Murthy's office or Azim Premji's office and say, "Can you give me $2 million?" It's not in my skill set, and I regret that. Or even if I could go to the vice chancellor of Christ University, those guys are rich. And if I could just tell them, put 5 crores into a space program, that's my regret.
Right, and then I can only empathize in that sense, I guess, into all of this. But with the rise of some of these private universities, especially backed by some of these corporates, right? You have Shiv Nadar and Ashoka,
Yes.
and many of them. Is there where the hope largely stays in the next decade?
Now, I have mixed feelings about this. Firstly, I do think that the majority of the education, you have to have a healthy public sector, public education system at all levels, from primary education to tertiary education. You have to have that healthy public university system. These private universities, I do think there's a place, but as you know, many of the private universities in India are purely profit-making. They're not even there to give an education. The students don't go there to get an education. The students go there to get a degree, which they then use to get a job. And then that's the hallmark of success. How many jobs are you giving your students? So some places like Azim Premji, I have a lot of respect for. Ashoka, I don't know that much about Ashoka, but to me, it's more of a well-heeled, it's a liberal arts college in the US at half the price. And you know what they say about liberal arts colleges, that you spend a lot of money to get a useless degree. Shiv Nadar, I think, had promise, but then finally, it takes a lot of money to build a world-class university. And I don't think Shiv Nadar himself was quite aware of how much money it cost. So I have not heard that much about Shiv Nadar. Same thing with the new universities like Kriya and those universities. I just don't know. BITS is making a good effort. The BITS Pilani system. They're really trying to push research, but it'll still. There's no place in India that does as good work as the government institutions. Whether it's IIA or IUCA or TIFR or ICERS or IITs or ISC, they're still the cream of the crop.
And is there any capacity building that these government institutions can do in front of the government to say that we need more funding, or to show any metrics that can convince government to pump in more and more money? Because if you look at ISRO, they have been able to do that very well over the last 15 or 20 years, having gone from budgets that were 2,000-3,000 crores to today like 11,000-12,000 crores, right?
Yeah, ISRO, like the defense guys, like DRDO, they have advantages that we don't, because they're very much mission oriented. So they can say Gaganyaan, human program, we go to the moon, we go to Mars. And these have some value because they're specific deadlines, specific projects that have some imaginative appeal. So what do? We study black holes. We study, in my case, interstellar dust. And in the old days, when Nehru set up this science system that we have, there was very much a belief that science would lead us forward, a belief in doing science for the sake of doing science. But over the last 2 decades, not even just the last decade, really over the last 2 decades, I've seen the focus change from doing basic science with the understanding that even the basic science would help in this capacity building and so on. This was what it takes to be a modern nation. We've now become very much an applied science country. And so we're told that we have to start funding ourselves. And how can we fund ourselves? Maybe we charge our students more, but that's a self-defeating system. Maybe we rent out our auditorium for weddings on weekends. But so we're being told that we have to connect to the people. Some places can do it, but if you're going to do pure research in astronomy, we can't really do that. So we've been trying to say that, yes, capacity building, yes, we're Look at TMT. TMT is really helping to build the industry in the country. But that's a harder, they don't see that connection. It's hard to sell that connection to the people who come in and out. You have a finance secretary, for instance. That finance secretary is here for a year, 2 years. They're looking for the next position up. They're looking to become from finance secretary, they're looking to become secretary. It's very hard to get them to understand that, look, you give us, you're giving us 60 crores. Instead of 60 crores, give us 80 crores. And we'll be able to do not 1/3 more research, but we'll be able to double the research. So right now, our funding is very, very tight and very focused. We pay salaries. We pay for infrastructure, things like internet and heating and things like that, and very little money for development. I have an instrument building program, and we're struggling. We're really struggling to get money for that.
And all of this, does it really constrain the imagination that you can have for your own research to a very large extent? I imagine that a lot of the people in the astronomy community in India are forced by the fact that the pot of money that they have access to as project money or research money, apart from all the other overhead expenses or salaries or so on, is quite small. So the kind of research that you can even imagine pursuing is extremely limited with that.
What our primary limitation is in the hardware. So in the other part of my work, the modeling, the observations, no, I'm not limited at all. I have good computers. I have access to all of that. Where I am limited is in the instrument building part. Yes, and that is a severe limitation. If I had, I'm working on maybe 10, 15 lakhs a year. If I had 1 crore a year, then obviously that would allow me to do so much more. It does restrict us, yes.
And how much of that is attached to the outcome in research? As in, does the community in India therefore produce results that are skewed towards software or use of theory or software related data, or getting data primary from outside sources to do their work instead of building their own instruments and so on?
The big exception to this is still, we do have these programs like GMRT. GMRT is a wonderful achievement, and they're continuing to build on that. They built that expertise, and as a result of that expertise, they're now big players in the square kilometer array. Because of our optical experience, we're now a 10 or 15% partner in TMT. So these programs are continuing. And the CERN project, the high energy project, that's another project that's been running for many years, where we are building hardware for that. So there are a few big projects that are running. I think they're still constrained by various things, but nevertheless, they are running well. ITER, the Indian fusion program. So those are running. Where we're suffering is in smaller programs. So many times you have the large programs and you have someone who wants just a 1% of the money or a 0.1% of the money just to build something smaller, but that will still build into that ecosystem. That's lacking.
Right, and does this also have an impact on, so does this also have an impact on the kind of students and the kind of research staff that you can have, obviously, right? Because it then constrains them to also, doing certain things that they may do differently when they have, better avenues and better prospects.
Yes, that's right. So most of the students we get are all some sort of theoretical or observational students, not many students in instrumentation, because especially the big projects like TMT, you can't really have students working on it because it's a production line environment. There's not much scope for learning. A lot more engineers working on that program than scientists. Same thing with ITER, a lot more engineers working than scientists. So yes, it does constrain your training program. And this is one thing where I have been trying to, for many years, I did sell our instrumentation program to DST on that basis. We've produced 5 PhD students from this instrumentation program. And that's a good thing. You're training people in astronomy instrumentation, which is a worldwide shortage. There really are not people in astronomy instrumentation in the world. This year, because of various reasons, we were not continued by DST, so we need to look for more funding from that.
Right, and that's exactly the point, right? Because ultimately, you need some people in the intersection of 2 different things or 3 different things who understand the world of science and the world of instrumentation at the same time, or the world of astronomy and the world of AI or machine learning or computer science or something like that,
right,
to produce the new results and to have those new techniques and everything else. And fundamentally, that's the approach I see as problems in other sectors as well, or in other areas of space related work as well, because often you will have engineers or who do certain things but may not understand other implications, or you might have people who are CEOs of companies who don't really understand, let's say, policy landscape, or not really interested in it, but it does have an impact into your own business. So I guess this is and I guess many of the countries out there, including China, may be focusing on all of these things.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how that works in practice. I mean, what you say is certainly true, that Israel, for instance, is much more of an engineering group. And they do some science, but the science is hurt by not having enough good scientists on board who are familiar with that field. In India, many times there's a tendency to think that because that expertise is pluggable, you have expertise in one area, and then next project you work on something else, and so your expertise in the one area, you may be experienced in Venus, and somehow that Venerian experience translates to the sun. And I mean, that's not true. You become an expert in planetary atmospheres. That doesn't help you in studying the moon. So yes, we do have that loss of broad institutions. IA, for instance, we're only astronomy. We have only astronomers. And so we don't have that public policy aspect. A place like NIAS is supposed to do more of that. And I mean, to some extent, they're successful.
I also wonder if the public outreach that ISRO gets also through, some of these space flight and these rocket launches and other things that are broadcasted on national television and everything else, it makes the institution, reach out to the audience using a pipe that is nationwide in that sense. And that encourages policymakers to also fund these institutions to a larger extent. And is that aspect largely influencing the perception of policymakers to those institutions against, institutions like IAA, where there's very little core outreach effort that uses mainstream communications channels to reach out to the public itself?
So let's break that out. In IAA now, all DST institutes, all government institutes now have the mandate to do outreach as well. It's always been our mandate to bring astronomy to the people. Constitution, right? Bring increase scientific temper. So this has always been our mandate. In the past, it's been done as a secondary part of our own work. So I give a lot of talks. Maybe I give 20, 30 talks a year. Maybe I reach 1,000, 5,000 people a year. So that much we've always done. Now we do have a dedicated outreach program with dedicated outreach hires. And so, as does every institute. So you will see more of that happening. ISC's Science Day That's a superb program. When they open up in February, and the whole institute gets maybe 100,000, 200,000 people going through. So those are great things, and these all happen. Now, ISRO has, to my mind, has a different responsibility. And as I think you also agree, they have not quite met this responsibility, in the sense that they do have a public relations department and all, but they've never felt it their responsibility to really reach out to the public, to go out to colleges and to bring colleges in, to bring students in. Many times I get calls from newspapers or TV stations. Can you talk about the Venus probe? And I tell them, look, what do I know about the Venus probe? I only know as much as you do. I got a call once from someone in what's that magazine in the US, the Planetary Report magazine. Anyway, I got a call from them asking about the Mars program. I said, look, I don't know anything about it. You have to write to ISRO. Said they'd written to ISRO and they got no response. And so you really do have to, with the organization that has the resources ISRO does. See, our budget is 60 crores and almost all of that is tied up. But ISRO, with their budget, they should really have this big outreach program. Go out to colleges, go out to universities, hire professional educators. Not do it not do it. For instance, I give fairly good talks. I know how to talk to people, and people like my talks, but I'm not an educator per se. I can't do like a teacher does and go to 5th standard and explain all of astronomy. It's not my, and if I do that, then I won't be doing my real mandate, which is to do astronomy research. You need professionals doing this. And that's where I think ISRO could really do much better.
It's heartening to know that you now have, what you said, science communicators hired full-time. Is that correct?
That's right. IUCAA has always had this. And they've had a very good outreach program. It was part of their mandate when they started. Now we have one science outreach person full-time. That person handles more of these schools and stuff. We have these regular talks now. We have yesterday for the conjunction, or day before yesterday for the conjunction. We had a YouTube session. We have a YouTube channel. We get we put out programs from Hanley. So we do all of this. In addition, we've hired a new person at basically an associate professor level who is going to do much more, really try to do the broad out programs where, in India, we have such a range of people. So a lot of times the only people we hit are the people who go to the elite schools. But we want to really have an active program that goes out to rural areas, rural Karnataka, rural Tamil Nadu, and go there. So we've hired someone to do that. Because of COVID and so on, he hasn't joined yet, but we hope that will start soon. I'll tell you a simple thing. We have this guy, Norman Pogson, who was one of the early directors of the Institute. His grave is in this cathedral in Europe, in Madras, St. George's Cathedral, I think it is, right next to the US Embassy. His grave is disappearing. And we want to bring it back up. It'll cost us 30,000 rupees. And, it's just something we'd like to do, put a little explanation around it. So these are the kinds of things we'd like to do. The Madras Observatory is where the Survey of India started. And there's not much evidence of that now. They have the old original instrument there, but we would really like to start building that up. So from little things to big, start doing more.
And it brings me, to notice that there's a lot of outreach related aspects. That is also interesting. I read a book from a friend of mine who's explored a character called Stephen Smith, who's from Calcutta, who's Anglo-Indian and was trying to build rockets in the 30s in India, right? So
yes, I read that book. Yes.
Um, so I wonder, are there a merit for a lot of that kind of also historical research into people who were primarily in British India or even back for hundreds of years for that matter, to really explore what are their contributions beyond the famous characters and the famous personalities that we already know, that everybody knows in that sense, and to bring their contributions into light today?
Yeah, I was very much struck by something Radham Narasim had said. I mean, of course, he passed away a few days ago, and I've been reading some of the work he did. And we have to strike this balance between this tendency to say that we did everything in the past, plastic surgery, and we went to Mars, atomic weapons, whatever, because that takes away from the very real things that we did do. So I think that there's a lot of scope for a good historical survey of what we did, from Tipu Sultan's rockets. I mean, really innovative stuff. Someone said that this was the first military-industrial complex in the country, and so we've lost a lot of that. This Stephen Smith, I had no idea until I read that book that he was there. So yes, I think that this is really needed. Now the question is, where do you do that? And in the West, you have scientific historians, people who work on the history of science, and it's a recognized thing. You have people on the faculty doing that. Now in India, because our university system has not really done research, we don't have that kind of cross-cultural reference point. So IAA, we would not hire a historian of science because it's not really in our direct line. We don't hire planetary scientists either. Planetary scientists don't apply to us, despite ISRO's planetary ambitions. They keep asking us, why don't you do planetary science? No institute in India has ever done planetary science because we just don't, it's not what we've done. And the same thing with historians of science. It's just not been done. And this is where we really suffer by having a small community. In my opinion, if you put whoever, if the government puts a lot more money into just academic research, you will get all of these byproducts at a low cost.
Yeah, and it almost brings the model of JPL or something into mind for me, because when you talked about this area of planetary science, I was having a conversation with Siddharth, who started this lab in Amity in Bombay, right? Where he's bringing this astrobiology group there.
Yes,
and,
yes.
I guess, I see that as a more viable option as of today, and more possibly implementable, because you could have somebody like a Siddharth who's studied abroad, done his PhD in Australia, wherever, and has come back and set up that lab using private university support, and has built up a program there. And eventually, if that program gets traction, there's a chance that government can actually consider that somebody is given a head start to that area in the country, and actually can grow that by partnering with them, even though they are primarily began as a private institute, and almost have a kind of a public-private partnership going once there's a mature program in such an area.
No, absolutely. I think he's done a great job. Again, Amity has not had a very high reputation in the past. And I do think that we hadn't talked of them before, but it is my impression that Amity is trying to improve themselves. And this is certainly the way to do it. If I've been saying the government needs to put money into academic research, but if these institutions would put a very small fraction of their money into a proper focused effort like this astrobiology program, they would be able to increase their metrics significantly. I mean, that's what they count. They count metrics in the end. And if they just put money, a little bit of money into building up these programs, they would really help themselves. And I felt this about Infosys and Wipro. I think I told you the story about when I came to India. I went to Infosys and I went to Wipro, and I said, why don't we do some work? And you have so many people on the bench. Why don't we take one or two people off the bench, have them do some data mining, big data. It would help us, and it would give your people some live experience. They finally came back. They were interested at the beginning. I talked to some people, and then finally came back and said, no, we're not interested because it's not in our area. So yes, I think that that if we can really start building these in these institutions, they all have a lot of money. They all have an enormous amount of money which they get from tuitions. Really, they could do that.
Yeah, one of the things that we miss often in India, I think, is that most of the trained scientists in astronomy and planetary, I mean, not maybe planetary sciences, but astronomy, and a lot of the tools and techniques that they use, people have used it in the US to move into the financial industry, into stock markets and hedge funds and
absolutely
XYZ, right? So I think we have not looked at all of that in India at all. I haven't seen any evidence of anybody looking at it, and even government seeing the synergies of how the tools and the trades and everything gained through invested in, people investing in research and all of that can be transferred into other areas that can have a significant outcome for the overall job economy, the tax revenues and everything else is that the government wants to have.
Yeah, no, this is something that that I think we failed on all levels. I mean, the students that we get, I don't think our students look outside enough. I don't think the industry is ready to acknowledge our students' training, and certainly, I mean, the government is. I don't know what they do, but yes, I think that that we do of the people who got their PhD from Hopkins, my friends over let's say 4 or 5 years, several people moved to Wall Street. There are not that many people who are still doing science. I've seen a description where really a PhD, it's a way to really enjoy what you're doing for a few years, while getting the training that will help you later on. And yes, we have not been able to build that ecosystem properly in India. I don't even know if I went to a company, I don't even know what kind of job I would get. I don't know if they would even value any of the experience that I have.
Right, and I guess it's also a little bit of a feedback loop in all of this because in the US, you have people coming out and showcasing those examples and putting it in the public sphere, saying, I did this, and today I'm a success case, and I've done or returned so much money in a hedge fund or whatever it is to my stakeholders because I had all of this training. And I actually watched a couple of TED Talks, or even I remember a couple of movies of people actually acknowledging this.
Right, absolutely. The great thing about the US is that these are recognized examples, places. It's no accident that Silicon Valley grew up out of Stanford and Berkeley. The whole pharma sector out of MIT, in my own institute, Hopkins. Baltimore has a huge medical industry, and even in Bangalore. Why is Bangalore Science City? Why is Bangalore the techno capital of the country? It's because of ISC and because of all the engineering institutes that grew up around. So yes, you need that ecosystem, and we need to somehow, that should be advertised and monetized. I keep telling people that the job of a faculty member is not to do groundbreaking technical development. It's not my job to build the employment industries. Rather, what I would do, what my job is to build the manpower, the people who will then go on to found Facebook and Microsoft and Apple, and that's what my job is. Not to do it personally, but to build that, to encourage the development of the individual.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think looking at all of this, it gives me a sense that we are so still at the precipice of exploring so many things. And I guess, there's only more and more to do in all of this, as it is with space and, with the new space revolution that we've seen at least begin in India with many of these companies participate. That brings me to this point of how involved is the astronomy community with respect to the instrumentation or the satellites that ISRO builds, and are there real synergies that happen there?
The main involvement of the academic community in ISRO is in the science satellites. So AstroSat had academic involvement. Now Aditya is fully academic, with some involvement from PRL, of course. PRL, more or less an academic institute. Our program is academic. There's not many other instrument building teams in the country for space that work with ISRO. But for that ecosystem to grow, there has to be two things. One is that the new space community has not really approached us for participation, and some of that because what do I know about rocket fuel, for instance? I know a lot about space. I know a lot about spacecraft, but it's like that episode of Big Bang Theory. Their car breaks down. And they all ask, well, who knows about an internal combustion engine? And everyone says, oh, easy stuff, 1876 and so on. Okay, who can fix the car? And no one can fix the car. So that's where I am. I know a lot about everything about the new space industry, but I don't know how to build a rocket engine, for instance. So that conversation has not happened. It's difficult for us to initiate it because again, it's not an area that I feel comfortable in. I don't feel comfortable cold calling someone and saying, hey, can I get involved in your research? It would be a useful talent if I could cold call Kiran Majumdar-Shaw, who put money into Team Indus, and say, hey, would you like to put the Biocon logo on my Chinese space station payload? But that's not me. So I think that there is room for synergy, and I hope that happens. As you know, I'm a little skeptical about the new space industry, because I think many of them are solving problems for which there's no taker. Very interesting problems, but then like this Japanese guy who wants to put 100 lunar rovers. Is there really a demand for 100 lunar rovers? So that kind of stuff. Was that the question? I'm not sure. I think that there should be a lot of synergy. I think that we should be able to talk. We should be talking to each other a lot more. But for whatever reason, that hasn't happened.
Yeah, the point is that what it boils down to cost of doing science, right? And ultimately, that's mostly it. So if you look at a lot of the NASA CLPS kind of payloads that are out there, the lunar landing program for the rovers and everything else, you have now a lot of the university programs are attached to a lot of these commercial companies, commercial lunar companies that are basically the goal for them, I guess, is that that they are only interested in the payload and the data and everything else, and they don't really care about which vehicle takes them there and if who provides them communication and so on. So there, I guess, the access that they can get cuts the bureaucracy that they have to go through if they have to build a large proposal and build everything by themselves that traditionally that people would do, but instead really focus on their core focus and have a smaller pot of money to do whatever they have to do to get the science out.
What you're saying is that really there has to be that academic industry. The academia serves as a conduit for money from the government to industry. And that, I think, is absolutely correct. And NASA does this well. So they do fund a lot of universities, and then those universities go out to industry. I was involved in several large spacecraft proposals when I was at Hopkins. And we had proposals with Ball Aerospace and proposals with APL. And the money would have come from NASA, but they would have been funded, we would have been funded at the university, and then we would have subcontracted all the work to the industry. And in many ways, we do that. In my own program, we do that. Some components we have to get from abroad, like our detector. It comes from Photech in the UK. But other things like our, we need to build a CFRP structure that we're planning to use this company, I forgot the name of the company, but a guy called Gosakan. He builds CFRP structures. And we would like to have him build that structure. So I think that there would be, I think that what you say is absolutely correct. SpaceX would not have grown to where they are without that enormous NASA funding. So if ISRO, or by extension, the government of India, were to really fund these instrumentation programs. Many years ago, we had gone to ISRO, and they have this habit of picking one big project. We said, don't pick one big project. Pick 10 projects at the phase A level, and then fund them for some smaller amount of money. The ones that progress, you start giving them more funding. If we could get that kind of pipeline done, it would be great. I've talked with industry people, and I've asked them, why aren't you more ready to do work with academia? And the thing is that, we don't have control of our own funding, right? We have to give a contract out. We need to have the whole tender process. We need to have L1. If we don't give L1, we're in trouble. And, you don't always give, L1 isn't always the company you want. Sometimes, people underbid. I've had this happen in computers. People give second-rate computers and they pretend as though it's top quality. I mean, you really need to have that trust that everything will come through. And for a company to do it, they need to have trust that we get money from the government expeditiously, and then we're able to release that money to them. If we can do that, then maybe they'll take a chance. Maybe they'll say, okay, look, we'll start work now, and we have the understanding that we'll all grow together. So I think the key aspect of this is we need to get funding from the government. And then we can really build that new space economy, because then we can say, okay, I would like to buy a CubeSat. And if you will build my satellite, I will build my instrument, you put it in a satellite, and then we'll get it launched on an ISRO rocket. That will build that community.
Right, and this is where I think some of the early efforts that you had with Team Indus, I think, were in this direction, right?
Absolutely. We had a lot of good discussion with Team Indus, and in fact, even up to the level, and before that, I had that same discussion with L&T, that we were going to put in proposals together, funded by ISRO, and it would help everyone. And Team Indus, we talked about building a satellite. They would build a satellite for us, and we would put an instrument on the satellite. I mean, yes, we've tried this, but you need different abilities from what I have. I was reading about this. I'm reading this book about this guy Newman who founded WeWork. A guy just goes to talk to people, and based on absolutely nothing, he gets people to invest in him. That's a great ability.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, not every one of us can do every one thing that we want to have. Eventually, the skill sets limit us ultimately,
Yes,
right, in
yes.
all of this. I do hope this particular thing with newer companies that are going to realize hardware more in the coming months and years, especially with companies like Pixel and others really putting out hardware in the next coming months. That's going to give some opportunity, because especially like hosting payloads, if not a dedicated satellite that you can buy, can give some of these opportunities, and that can really have the barrier to space reduce for and then give some kind of liberty for institutions like yourself to work directly with the industry once the industry has built capacity. Because so far, I think all the companies that you talk to, like even for example L&T or even Team Indus or so on, so they have not yet demonstrated independent capacity to put out their own systems and to have independent IP that they can put out that works in space, right? But we're only reaching that point with some of these companies, having booked their launches and putting out the hardware, and seeing that the investment is kind of real and the hardware is kind of real. The only thing that has to do is that hardware has to work in space for people to then trust it and then invest in them.
Yeah. So we're trying to we've been trying for a while to get our star camera. Some industry guy interested in our star camera, because we produce stuff that's competitive, but at probably 1/3 of the price. And yet I can't seem to get anyone interested in that. Again, it's my lack of ability to sell things, I guess.
And it's also partly, the whole culture of commercialization is a different phenomena altogether, I guess. You look at a lot of the people who are out there, doing some of these research aspects in science. Some of them do have the skill of saying that I do see an opportunity to commercialize a lot of this thing, and there's a certain elements of market support that they get. So, for example, I have friends in South Africa at Stellenbosch, for example. They have program that runs universities, small satellite missions, and so on. So they were successful in having the university support them to take that IP and have contracts with the company to spin off that IP into the market. And essentially, the university acted as the vehicle to get space heritage, because space heritage is the most important part of selling anything into the commercial market.
Right.
And it's exactly the same thing in South Africa, right? They have the exact same phenomena occurring. You have everything as lower cost as in India. The cost of running, the cost of running infrastructure, cost of running manpower, everything is almost the same. But they're very successful in taking that step, because they have that institutional support of some of these universities having the mechanism to support that kind of spinning off and in giving them that kind of support to move it. But in India, we have all of these programs that have been running with universities for 10 or 15 years now, since student satellites really started, but none of them have been able to mature to that level where the universities have said, now that we have some hardware working in space, we see a path for some of these people who are involved in this program to go out and commercialize it and build something on top of that.
So there's a couple of aspects there. The first thing is that the South Africans have always been very supportive of science. And I've seen that. I worked with their government on the BRICS program, in the BRICS astronomy program. And the South Africans are really dedicated to science. They've made an effort to build their science program. And I know this in astronomy, perhaps in other areas also. SKA, they're heavily involved in SKA. So that's one part of it. The second part is that this university thing that you talk about, in India, again, because of the nature of our universities, which are not true educational institutions, but rather degree granting factories, that their focus has not been to build they don't build satellites for the sake of advancement of technology or science. They build satellites because they think it'll help them attract students. And so the people who are involved, you have a bunch of very enthusiastic undergraduates who always pick a project that's too difficult for them. And those undergraduates graduate and the program becomes too diffuse. The faculty members don't really have an interest or knowledge. And so the programs just don't work properly. So I don't think a single one of those CubeSats has worked, including the ones from IIT. I don't think any one of them has I don't know if any one of them has even sent a radio signal back, but certainly none of them have done what they're supposed to do. And now they just use it as publicity, and it's not a long-running program. It's not a program where you're working hard to do it. IIT Bombay now seems to be having a real interest in building a sustainable space program. And they've been getting a good bit of funding also. So hopefully that will start.
Yeah, especially because, I have a few customers in South Africa for my company. And, when I look at them, it's really interesting because you talk to them and they say we were born out of Sunsat, which was a university project that was 20 years old or so on. Mm-hmm. And most of the engineers come from that heritage of having worked on that through the university program. And you have a couple of, satellites from Stellenbosch and the university in Cape Town and so on. So, and interestingly, they are able to now showcase to the policymakers there and the space agency there that 95% plus of their customers are abroad and 95% of their products are export. Mm-hmm. And so you have literally not much funding available in the public system with the space agency and everything for them to plug into. But because, they had some heritage and some IP and everything else that they took control of, they're able to build sustainable businesses that are supporting, a few hundred jobs with 20, 30 companies in there in such a small system.
Sure. So Anna University, which was the first of the big, of the university programs, I don't know what's happened to any of those people who worked on the program. I mean, maybe you know.
Yeah, I mean, I have no clue. I think most of them, as I followed it, I was plugged into the whole university CubeSat program maybe more than 10 years ago in India. And I see most of them either having landed up in jobs abroad, having to do work in NASA or some commercial companies abroad, or, people who have switched completely to other fields. And because there's not many opportunities then available. So that's how, unfortunately, everything transpires if we don't have a sustainable path to building manpower that can scale based on a particular mission.
That's right. No, again, if you look at the software industry, if you look at Silicon Valley, it grew up out of Stanford, and there were faculty who were experts in the field. And the students went out and founded companies, and they kept the Stanford University. They kept them in the loop. So it was a continuing program. I mean, some might say too far to the commercial side, but still, it's been a two-way feedback loop.
So, what do you think is things that we can do at this point of time? Given the situation that we are in India, given the COVID times and the recovery of the economy, I don't see anything that is possible to change in terms of funding for science, at least given that most of the funding, I guess, will go into economic recovery immediately and not long-term as it would need for science and so on. What do you think are the prospects for the coming years?
We're struggling in science now, and this is not COVID related. We've been struggling in science because the focus has been more in applied fields. So they want our official policy is that we need to do socially relevant science. Okay, I mean, what is socially relevant science? But so that I don't think that the prospects are going to change very much. we don't do socially relevant science. We do science, we do blue sky research. And we think it's got, we think it has benefits beyond the simple academic research we do. We think that we do spread out, we increase the scientific temper of the country, but we don't help the farmer grow wheat. We don't help water preservation. So that is not going to change, and that's not COVID related. That's just in general. COVID for science in principle, I think the wrong lesson to take is that we should take money away from science and put money into economic recovery. Because as we've seen, one of the things that COVID has really brought out is the lack of trained people in the country. Our response has not very much been informed by experts. And so we make decisions that are and projections that have not been, that are not supported by any kind of rational theory. I think we've suffered there. And I think that where we really need to go is we do need to, even in times of crisis, and especially in times of crisis, we do need to build up the educational system, because that's how you build a robust system, a system that can handle crises like COVID. So that's one thing. The how we can handle it, or how we can, one of the things that is happening is that there is a great emphasis on academic ranking. And so this Shanghai ranking, the Times Higher Education ranking, those have their own problems. And what has happened is that many of these institutions have learned to game that system. So they don't actually improve education, rather they improve their ranking. Because that's their metric. Their metric is ranking, not education. What they should really do is they should improve their entire education system, and then the ranking will automatically go up. But no, they want to improve their ranking. So, but as a result of this, there is pressure on the university system, as perhaps Amity has felt, that we need to become world class. There's a market here if we can start attracting students from how many Indian students are going to China now? Why should we not be able to attract students from Malaysia or Thailand or East Africa, South Africa? Let's start attracting those students. And so they are understanding this. And so hopefully that is where growth will come. They will realize that really the best way to improve their rankings is not just by gaming the system, but by actually hiring people. I've often wondered why it is that no one has approached me. I have a good enough publication record that if I joined any of these universities, their rankings would rise by 10 points. So why is it that, or if not me, why have they not approached younger people at IA and said, look, we'll give you we know you've done good work. You continue that work, you build up your own group, we'll give you not very much money, 50 lakhs a year, 1 crore a year, and you build up a good solid group that will do world-class research. I think that's the way to go, and I hope that people do realize that.
Jayant, I think this has been a fascinating conversation. I don't want to take too much of your time again. We've already spent almost an hour plus talking about all of this. I think there's a lot of takeaways here, and this might be relevant. The conversation might be relevant for a long time, as we see in India, that things take some time for things to change.
Yeah, I've proselytized this for a while, but so far not much action.
So again, thank you very much for taking the time. I'll put out your coordinates for people to reach out to you in case they're interested.
Sure. Sure. Anyone. Yeah. Let me tell you just 2 minutes about our projects now.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
The first one is the star sensor. So we've got a launch on the next on one of the next PS4 missions. So hopefully we'll be up by June, July. We're just putting together the final payload now, final alignment and calibration, and we're ready to go. bolted onto the PS4, and hopefully that'll be June, July. The other thing is this UN program that we got accepted for, the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs. And the Chinese Space Agency had offered a slot on the Chinese space station for several payloads. And so we were one of, I think, 19 payloads, 14 payloads, whatever it was, to be accepted. So we're building that instrument now. We just had a discussion with the Chinese yesterday. We're trying to work out all the interfaces and stuff. And so what we'll do is it's niche science. We're doing it for not very much money, a few $20,000 or so. I mean, whoever heard of a space experiment for $20,000? But that's what we're doing. And so we hope to get good publishable science, not space telescope type science, but good publishable science. And we do think, or I at least think, that there is a lot of scope if universities would come and approach people like me, other people around the country who are doing similar things for reasonable payloads in collaboration with the university. Let the university focus on the satellite, which is what most of their students are interested in, and collaborate with us on doing the science. I think that would be help everyone.
Yeah, absolutely, and good luck with all of that. I think you're setting a kind of a track record in India, because you've done things that usually I have seen not do, an experiment and fiddle with, and at least try to come up with some new things that you could experiment originally with. And it's I think some things that younger people who are now getting into the fray and looking to come back to India can look at and learn from.
Absolutely. I think that our program is actually unique in this. I mean, worldwide. That's why my students got hired, because there's not so many programs that do this. None of them had any problem getting jobs. They all got jobs right away because they're in demand. Space qualified instrumentation people.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much again, and I hope you have good research prospects coming up post-COVID, and and even
Sure.
As things go along, things get better, and hopefully some of these new space companies will try to do something where you guys can club them into your research programs, and there's some synergies that will happen out there as well.
Right.
So that's at least the hope.
Okay. Thanks for having me.